Hey, gang, welcome back to another episode of the Deeper Dive podcast. Got Annie Snyder with me again today, back in the co-pilot or pilot position, depending on what we're
Oh,
talking about. Uh,
that was just off the rails. It's your fault, not mine.
yeah, we're already off the rails, Annie. So, Annie, introduce yourself. I'm the lead pastor at New City Church. Who are you? What do you do?
Hey guys, I'm Annie Snyder. I'm the owner, clinical director of Albuquerque Mental Health, an outpatient counseling agency here in Albuquerque. All of our clinicians are expertise in depression, anxiety, trauma, and stress, all of which we have talked about in the last couple times.
Fantastic. All right. So this week in the Deeper Dive podcast, we're going to take a tag uh, from Shelley Rep, who was our speaker on Sunday. Shelley preached a great sermon about our well-being in the city and how do we, stick with it when the city itself sometimes tends to work against our own mental well-being. And she said something at the end of the sermon that we're going to receive as a tag and kind of jump into maybe a slightly different conversation today. She said, "Hey, I've got this 2 week rule. And if got a struggle, you've been struggling for 2 weeks and you can't shake it, that's a kind of a good sign that you need to see somebody." Well, it seems like every week in this message series, we've said something to the effect of, "Hey, maybe you should see somebody. It could be really helpful for you." I've talked about how I've seen therapists for different things over the years in my own personal life and the benefit it's been to me in the teaching series. So we've talked about it openly. We're in the series Weeds My Garden, so we're unafraid to talk about the weeds in the series and to get honest. We're not just presenting roses. And so what I want to do today is have a conversation with Annie about, well, how do you choose a therapist? And let's say you choose one, what should you expect in a meeting? And maybe we'll get to like, how do you know when to bail on a therapist? That kind of thing. So, there's lots of challenges to overcome in seeking a therapist. I think one of the first ones is just availability and the expense. And, Annie, how would you address? I mean, so let's say you're in that spot and you're like, okay, maybe it's been 2 weeks for me, or I've been listening to the message series. I'm hearing all these people being courageous about how they've seen somebody and the help that's been to them, and I'm just now getting the courage to see somebody, but I've got the hurdle of like the expense, or I've got the hurdle of, who's even available, or where do I go? Help us out. What's a good starting place if you're in that place, Annie?
Yeah, those are all really great questions. So number one, if you have health insurance, you have counseling coverage. With the changes in
Oh, that's
the
good.
Affordable Care Act, it was an add-on that every insurance plan must cover counseling. So if you have insurance, you have counseling coverage. If you do not have insurance, um, there's actually a lot of options that I'll touch on after we do the insurance route. There is an option out there for everyone. I promise you. So with the counseling, with your health insurance, what you're going to want to do is if you turn the card over, there's going to be a customer service on there. You're going to call that number and you're going to ask them, what is my copay for outpatient counseling? They're going to tell you. They're going to say $20, $25, $50. You're also going to ask them, do I have a deductible? What that is the amount that you have to pay. That's 100% of the counselor's cash pay rate before your insurance kicks in. A lot of people, they sign up for that cheap plan saying I'm only paying half of what I could be paying. That comes at a cost. So know that if you have an $800 deductible, you have to pay $100 every time, $125 every time, every calendar year until that amount is met and your copay kicks in. It is now mid-September. If you haven't met that or you're not even close to it, I might suggest holding off until January because you're going to pay that, say $800, end of the calendar year, come January, you're going to have to start paying that over again. And so if you can hold off till January, kick that out. I tell clients it's either going to go to counseling or to the optometrist. It has to get paid through any channel. It is also almost open enrollment time. So if you are employed, if you're getting private insurance, right around now is the time to choose. a plan or change a plan. So if you call and they say you have, a $75 copay, you can check all your plans out and say, I want the one that has the 20 copay. It's going to cost me more every month. But if I'm getting into counseling, my kids are getting into counseling, we're getting into couples, it's going to actually end up cheaper. So really play around, ask the questions, call your company's HR. If you have if you have like a private insurance plan, if you're self-employed, there are insurance people that you can call that you can say, this is what I need. This is what I do not need. And there's actually a couple plans in town that can really help you access counseling. So that's what you do if you have insurance. Trying to look for a counselor. I have heard until about a year ago, it was nearly impossible to get in. Nobody was taking clients for kind of uninteresting reasons. If we had more time, I would go into it. The pool of private practice counselors has really, really grown. Every agency that really I know is taking clients, that there is no longer a 2-month wait list, a 3-month wait list. If you have a very, very narrow area that so like you have a child with autism and you need an autism clinician or something super narrow, it may be a little bit harder. But right now, most agencies in town and private practitioners are taking clients. So no longer is it going to be you're calling 20 places and everyone sends you off to that next person. Ask around. Ask the drop-off mom at your school. Ask someone at your church. Ask someone at your exercise class. It's kind of a cool concept, but people love to talk about who's helping them.
Yeah.
They throw out those names like Oprah hands out presents at Christmas. And so ask if you've heard someone talking about
Yeah.
counseling, who do you see? What's their number? Where are they located? Having all the changes in COVID, most clinicians have either in person or telehealth. And so it's up to you if you would rather have it under the covers at your house in your pajamas, you have that option. Or if you're the type of person that needs that energetic human interaction, you can have that too. So ask them, are you seeing people in person? Are you seeing telehealth, hybrid? So that's the insurance part. If you have no insurance, there's a lot of options too. All graduate school interns have to have an internship at an agency where they provide low or no cost counseling. And I know a lot of people get all like weird about interns. Do they know what they're doing? You are actually going to get 2 clinicians for the price of, or the non price of, you're going to get 2 clinicians for the price of 1. Every intern has a micromanager, such as myself, supervisor, talking to them after every session, checking in, looking at their progress notes, and really helping these very eager young clinicians really try to give the greatest clinical care out there. So interns are actually great. So call around. I know UNM has an intern program. All of the pretty like larger agencies usually have interns. So you have options. So that's
That's
how to
really
go
good.
about trying to find a clinician. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. And I'll just, the word of encouragement about telehealth. I will say that I think the 2 counselors I've had over the years, 2 therapists, both psychologists who have benefited me. Meetings have been over Zoom,
Mhm.
but I didn't know them in person ahead of time. So that was kind of a hybrid experience. I know them in person, would see them at various sort of meetups, but
Mhm.
like Dr. West is somebody I've met with only virtually in terms of sessions, and it has been so good. And I didn't think that it could get because Zoom has like kind of a bad rap after COVID, the idea that you can't be personal, whatever. But I have found that I've been able to work through some pretty heavy stuff in a Zoom conversation,
Mhm.
and I've gotten more work done than I thought would be possible. So,
Mhm.
just a word of encouragement on that. I want to turn the conversation to kind of getting the most out of counseling in a second. We'll talk about how to dump a counselor. But let's just talk first. Let's just assume, oh man, I've made the decision. All right, I've done the work. I've identified the health insurance. I'm ready. Okay, I'm going to sign up and I'm going to go for my very first ever counseling appointment. What is something that that somebody going to a counseling appointment for the first time should know or should expect
Mhm.
in a first time conversation with a counselor?
Yeah, yeah. Well, every person who comes in is going to cry, and then they're going to apologize that they cry. That happens 100% of the time. Just know that you're coming in
Mm,
because you have a problem area in your life that you
yeah.
cannot solve on your own. That's not right. That's not wrong. That just is. I've had clients say, you know, I could probably learn how to change my oil. I could look online, I could do YouTube,
Mm,
I could solve problem solve, throw out a couple swear words, maybe do it right enough, or I could pay
yeah.
somebody, drop it off, and have the expert change my oil. You can probably figure out a way to kind of
Mm,
cobble your emotional state along, or you can go for an hour at a time and pay a person who is an expert at
mm-hmm,
treating anxiety or depression or trauma and stress. And so
yeah.
that is literally what they do. So do not come in and
Mm-hmm,
apologize. That's what they talk about all day. I also had a client tell me years ago, she said, I can see 180 degrees of who I am.
wow.
I want someone that can see 360 degrees. I need
Mm,
someone who can see way over there
yeah.
and who can just tell me candidly, this is what's happening. So,
Mm-hmm,
not a person that's always going to like take your side or say it in a way that doesn't hurt your feelings, can just say, this is what I see in your life that's problematic. And here's what could probably help. So, just know
that,
this is what we do. This is our job. You literally
yeah.
cannot tell us anything we either haven't heard before, that's TMI, that's we've heard it all. Trust us. Um, I I hear
Yeah.
all the this
Yeah.
might be a little too much information. I'm like, "Mm-mm, it's not, it's not." Um, so come in and have a plan. Every time a client comes in, I ask them 2 questions. I always say, "Why counseling now? Why not 6 months ago, 6 months from now?
Mm-hmm,
What's happening now that you're like, ooh, I think I need some outside help?"
yeah.
And if a person has really no idea what's driving them, at least they can kind of say, well, here's kind of how come I have the time, I have the money, my husband's going to kick me out, I got fired from my job. Even having a tangible reason as to why now can help us kind of hone in on like what the problem is. I also ask them, say you were coming for like a couple months and you were coming on time, you were doing your homework, and you could tell that it was helping. Maybe it's not perfect, maybe your life hasn't entirely changed, but if your life was improving, how could you tell? And clients may have a hard time talking about what's wrong. Most people, where there's something wrong, can say, this is what I would like my life to look like. And so if a client can't explain what anxiety is, they can say, oh, I would have a job. I wouldn't be arguing with my partner. I wouldn't be having panic attacks. So
Yeah.
you may not know what the problem is, or you may not be able to articulate it. But if you can say, this is what I want my life to look like, or a couple years ago, this is what my life looks like, a counselor can help you create a plan surrounding that.
That's so good. I think I've gotten the most out of counseling appointments when, well, I'll say it this way, to tag on what you already said, back up in a little bit, is I've always seen my time with whoever I'm meeting with as a way of shortening the recovery time.
Mhm,
I've said about my time with a counselor recently. I said I think I would have gotten through it. I think I would in like 3 years,
mhm,
but I was able to condense that to about a 3 month period. And I think that when you think about is a $50 copay, $150 of sessions worth saving yourself 2.5 years of
mhm,
recovery for a mental health challenge. I'd say that feels like a reasonable investment, right?
mhm,
And I know that it's uh, it's there. You probably could tough it out. I mean, I
Mhm,
think you're right, Andy. You probably could tough it out and get through it. But there's so much other cost involved in that: cost to relationships around you, cost of work effectiveness, cost of just sleep and well-being and everyday life. And if you can shorten that time period by a large measure, and I think you really can through counseling, it's worth the effort.
mhm,
I've also found, I mean, just tagging what you said, it would be really helpful for me when I've shown up. I've tried to show up with a real sense of like, you know, this is where I'm at. This is where I'd like to be.
mhm,
I'm not there, and I don't know how to get to where from where I'm at to where I'd like to be. So let's just start working on it. And um, I also know from the pastor standpoint, I'm not a counselor. I never pretend to be one, but I do counseling at times as a pastor. I have found it frustrating in my seat when I'm trying to help someone through an issue, when I feel like I'm doing more work than they are. I'm more invested in their problem than they are. And sometimes the reason you're struggling in a place is because you're just not simply doing the work, that you need to do to be in that place. And so showing up ready to do the work, showing up ready to engage mentally and emotionally can go so much. It takes the counseling so much further, so much more quickly.
mhm.
Uh, Counseling is a substitute for your own work. Would you agree with that, Annie?
100%. I tell every client, coming here is the warm up. The rest of the week is the workout. And you can
Yeah,
come and just hang around for an hour and tell me about your week and give me an update. If you want to pay me for that, I'll take your money. And you're going to be here a lot longer than if you come in
yeah,
and you have a plan and an agenda. And this is what I want to address. I can help you. The more information that you offer me, the stronger of a plan I can create. It's almost like I could make chicken noodle soup, throw some things together. If I have a recipe, I actually probably couldn't make chicken noodle soup, but if I have a recipe, I have an agenda and a map,
yeah,
and I know
yeah,
this is where we begin and this is where we're going to end. And so do not be concerned that you're coming with too much information. I have clients that keep journals. I have clients that send me text updates like, hey, I had an argument with my husband. Can we talk about this next week? And so coming and having a plan really helps you make the most out of our time together. So
yeah. Uh,
some people, they feel they have to come in and like, this is what happened last Monday and this is what happened last Tuesday. And while that's interesting, that's not particularly helpful because I tell people how someone tends to do anything is how they tend to do everything. And so if you come in and you're like, guess what my husband and I argued about today? I'm like, probably the exact same process that you argue about
yeah.
every time. So we're going to talk about the really uninteresting process of the way you live your life, not necessarily content. Um,
That's really good.
and along the same lines, clinicians in private practice oftentimes have no, I don't want to say no oversight, but if I'm alone and I'm seeing client after client, I may not know if I'm not being helpful, if I if I hurt your feelings, if I made you mad, if I made you sad. I appreciate it when clients can be, and it's hard, they can be vulnerable and say, "Hey, that really hurt me last week when you talked about your kids because I can't have kids," or that really makes me upset when you're changing our time because it makes me feel not important. And so do not be afraid, even though it's hard, to come to your counselor and tell them, this is
Yeah,
what I need you to do more of. This is what I need you to do less of. I would hope that even if it kind of hurts our feelings a little bit, like we're strong enough to hold that and to handle that. And that can be really
yeah.
helpful to practice that in a place where you can trust a person to contain that. So,
That's a really good feedback. Yeah, I've done that before. I mean, I've had to hit the brakes once or twice on the counselor and say, hey, I think we're exploring an area here that's not the
mhm,
most effective place to explore for the outcomes we're really seeking in this
yep,
meeting. I appreciate this rabbit trail, but I think we need to refocus around
mhm,
this issue. And sometimes that can be avoidance. So don't be surprised if the counselor's like, no, I really think we need to talk about this because you're
yeah,
trying to redirect and avoid that, and that's something you have to receive. But there have been times when that in the conversation, the counselor goes, you know what, you're right. I think that, yeah, let's just save that for another day. Let's work on this other thing. And to see it much more of a cooperative experience, I think is the right way of looking at it. So long as there's goodwill involved and you really aren't trying to practice some kind of avoidance technique. But if there's goodwill involved, you're really working on the issues. It's really helpful to the counselor, I think, to say, no, no, this is really what we're trying to.
Mhm,
I really need focus here. I need energy here. Let's focus the energy here, and that can really help. I think
mhm.
in getting the best out of it. All right, I want to talk about firing a counselor. How do you know when it's not working? All right, so I think let's just sort of state it this way. Um, I'm going to tell you my feelings about it, Annie, and hopefully, in the spirit of what we just talked about, it's not offensive to you.
Okay,
Uh,
let's hear.
it's my feeling that some people get into counseling because at some point in their life they were helped, and they get into it to that door, and um, it may not necessarily be an area of skill and
Mhm,
it's goodwill. I really want to do good in my life, but it's not an area of skill. Or if they have it, if they are skillful, maybe they might be skillful in a very specific range of
mhm,
places, and may not be, able to help you in what you're dealing with. And so I have found that, man, it's just because someone's a counselor doesn't mean they're a good one, and just because
mhm.
someone's a counselor doesn't mean they're the one for you.
Yes.
And so I think there's some work that has to be done there. And like, let's not write off counseling. This is my
Mhm,
fear. Let's not just write off counseling because you know somebody who had a bad experience, or you had a bad experience, because that bad experience could just be related to that was not a great counselor,
mhm.
or that was not the right counselor for that
Yeah.
particular person or for that particular issue. Can you speak more to that? What's it like to find? I mean, you have to hire counselors, so I'm sure you've interviewed and had
Mhm.
a sense of like, hey, there's a range of expertise here, there's a range of ability, and when I'm adding to the practice, I'm thinking about all those things too. I don't know if you have any insight on that or feel free sharing about that. What are
No,
your thoughts?
that's a really great topic, and I think people get real concerned about that, and it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be hard. But number 1,
No.
know your personality and know the type of
Yeah.
person that you can open up to and the people that you
Mm.
can't. So, for example,
Yeah.
I am a very, if you haven't already noticed, I am peppy, I am highly energetic, I am quick. I tell
Mm.
clients that. And at the intake, I say, if I am too much of anything, and trust me, I've heard it all. I've been too young, I've been too old, I've been just everything. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Yeah.
Like, I can hold that. And if you are wanting someone that's a little slower paced and quiet and older, let me know that. And I know 10 people in the community that
Mhm.
would love to work with you that can help you. Because if I can't help you, someone else out there can. And so do
Yeah.
not at the intake 10 minutes in, 20 minutes in. If you're not feeling comfortable, if you're not feeling safe, if they're doing whatever, just let them know I was
Yeah.
actually hoping to have a person that was more whatever. If gender is important, choose
Mhm.
the gender that you're comfortable with. I would say most things are a little negotiable that maybe if you're a little more kind of an Eeyore, maybe having a Tigger could help. But if
Yeah.
a particular gender, if you've had trauma associated with that, or if that really, really impacts you, choose the gender that you're comfortable with. That's kind of I would say is a not a non-negotiable, but trust your instinct. Um, Ask the questions on the telephone. Ask, how do you practice? What is your area of expertise? What's
Yeah.
your philosophy? Ask if they're
Yeah.
faith pace. I don't think that's always a necessity, but it can be important. If that's important to you, you don't, and
Mhm.
you come in and there's like chakras on the wall and a little baby Buddha in the corner, and that if you need a Christian counselor, just know this is probably
Mhm.
energetically not going to help me. I'm going to spend a lot more time looking around the office and really feeling grounded. So tell them,
Yeah.
get a referral, ask the questions ahead of time. If
Yeah.
you are in it and you're 3, 4 times in, 6 months in, and you're just like, "We've gone as far as we can," tell them. Let them know that
Mhm.
I tell my clients, the point of coming here is to not need to come here anymore. That if you're
Mhm.
walking up the stairs saying, "I don't really have anything to talk about," Or I ask clients, if you lost your health insurance and you had to pay cash, would coming here, like, are you getting enough out of coming here that you would rearrange your paycheck to put that into your budget? And if you're like, heck no, maybe it's time to move on. Um, if for whatever reason the connection isn't happening anymore, tell them. Clinicians would much rather know what the reason is that you guys are breaking up. And it's a breakup. You're in a relationship, it is intimate, and no one, any sort of relationship just likes to be left ghosted. If it happens, I'll survive. And if you say, this is why, I can help you. And so
Yeah.
again, you can tell them, this is what I need now. They will likely help you either get to that next person, or you can take a break and start up with someone else. I have heard so many times, I've had clients come in, who was your previous clinician? Oh, so and so. I didn't really like her. She wasn't. How long did you see her? 3.5 years. I'm
Yeah.
like, I will not eat at a restaurant if I didn't like it twice. Like, cut
Hmm.
cut that cord. If you know it's not helping you, cut the cord. Like,
Yeah.
don't be afraid of
Yeah.
hurting feelings.
I'll add to it, Annie. Yeah, I think that's good. Cut the cord. I think for those areas, I mean, from a pastor standpoint, there've been a number of times where I've met with somebody who's been in a counseling relationship, and the counselor has told them to do things that are openly against what God has already told them to do. And that's like, it goes back to the value statements that you were talking before, and so sometimes counselors will advise or give counsel, and if you hear that counsel and you go, I didn't seem to be in line with what Jesus would say to do. For example, I have heard from a couple seeking couples counseling that maybe they should try polyamory as an experiment. Well, if that's the counsel you're receiving, that's in the value system that doesn't support your value system. That's a good reason to go. Yeah, I think we're done, and go to see somebody else. That's totally okay and totally appropriate. And I think you can also be honest about it too, and just say, we just hold different values, and my values are faith based. They're born out of the Bible. I follow Jesus, and so I might need to find somebody who's in support of those values and can help in that way. And I think Dr. West is right when he said a few weeks ago in one of the sermons that when you are in a counseling relationship, and the counselor happens to be Christian and you're a Christian, they have a whole toolbox of things to pull
Mhm.
upon that can help you along the way, because all of those faith elements are there and available. And so I think that can be really helpful. And if you have the option, you really should try to pursue something in that direction. I think could be really helpful for you.
Mhm. I
Anything
would
else to tag onto that?
Yeah, I would also say that counseling is kind of like church. If I leave church every time and I'm happy and I'm upbeat and the world is great, I may not be being challenged enough. And so try not to confuse being mad at your therapist, being pissed off at your therapist, being angry about the session as, oh, I need to find someone else. It's our job to kind of pull up that hood and poke around, and it's not comfortable. It's going to be painful and you're going to be mad. That's actually gonna create growth. And so
Yeah, I think that's
try to toggle through, am I not getting something out of it, or am I getting something out of it, and that's why I
mhm.
need to return? And bring that up. You cannot over communicate to them. I was
Yeah.
really angry at you last week, and here's how come.
That's so good. Yeah,
Oh,
that really it's really helpful. Yeah, so I think that don't bail too early. Don't stay in too long.
mhm,
I mean, that sounds like wisdom to me. And you have to be able to apply some help that way. And then finding somebody, I think, listening is a really good tip. I mean, listen to who your friends have seen. I've recommended people that I've seen so much that I think I should get a kickback.
mhm,
I should be getting a little something on the side for as much as I've recommended a few people. But it's everybody who I've recommended, they found help that way because we swim in similar water, we come from similar value systems, and so it's natural as somebody has helped me that they would be available to help a
yeah,
friend of mine. And so I think that would make sense
mhm.
in terms of just practical wisdom. That's a place to look and see. Yeah.
Also, it helps to get established with a person now, kind of like a primary. So I tell people that sometimes counseling is urgent care and other times it's preventative care. And it helps a person, it helps you if you have that person. Like I have people that I see every other month and I've seen them for years. Or I have a person who calls in, says, "Hey, I need to get my oil changed. I need a tune up." They can come right in, and I don't have to spend a lot of time asking, like, "What are your hobbies? What are your medication?" Because I've known them for years, and they just come in for that oil change or for that
Yeah,
tune-up. And so, if you're, like, thinking about maybe having some counseling, I would really
so
encourage
good.
you, jump in now, get established now. Even if you resolve whatever it is, I can
Uh,
guarantee something else will come up. You'll have
that's
that
good.
person to call, and you won't have to spend all of that time in
Yeah.
January or April trying to come up with recommendations, names, who's taking
Mm.
clients.
That's so good. I think the way I've used it that way is the oil check. Check engine light comes on. I go, you know what? I need to go and just kind of get a tune up. Even recently, I was coming up on an anniversary of a difficult time, and I just went and met with somebody and said, "Hey, I'm coming up on an anniversary of a difficult time, and I don't necessarily feel like I need to talk to anybody, but I don't want to end up in a place where I wish I would have. And so let's just have a conversation about it. What can help me in preparation? I mean, that was such a great meeting, and I'm so glad I had it because when I did come up on a difficult conversation, I had resources available, was able to immediately deal with that. And so, what might have been a more dramatic exposure event was a less dramatic exposure event for me, and really became a non-event essentially. And I think a lot of it has to do with preventative care.
And it was probably great to have to not spend 2 or 3 times explaining it. Like, this person
Yeah,
already knew, they had context, they
that's
had
right.
history. Just jump in with, "Here's what's going on now," which is it's great to have
That's
a person
correct.
know your history.
That was so good. Yeah, really helpful. Hey, we hope this helps you guys to find somebody and also to have the confidence of knowing how to engage with that person as you're seeking them. So I don't know if this is worth saying again, but it's been one of the shocking things for me about this teaching series. And I think maybe because I got a counseling degree in my undergraduate studies and thought I might be a therapist one day and end up becoming a pastor. But that's another story for another time. But I've just never have had in my life this sort of feeling that, oh, somehow my faith community keeps me from feeling confident in seeing somebody in a therapeutic relationship, in a counseling kind of relationship. And that has been the case for many people. And so hear this. I mean, we're advocating for you if you need to see somebody, but also want to resource you in that. In that pursuit. And so hopefully this was a good resource for you. If you need to see somebody, you kind of know, all right, how do I fire one? How do I find a good one? All right, everybody's not necessarily for me, or everybody's not necessarily good. Okay, I got all that. And then here's how I navigate the insurance stuff. I mean, hopefully all this has been helpful to you. Any final words, Andy, before we sign off for this
Any
podcast?
questions, hunt me down and ask me. I've had a couple people come up to me after church and say, "Hey, I need a recommendation," and I'm glad to help. This is
Yeah.
tricky, this is scary, this is intimidating, and I can help you guys. So hunt me down. You can send me an email, whatever. I'd be glad to help.
Fantastic. It's been good to see everybody. Well, not see everybody. It's been good to see you, Annie. Hopefully, it's been good for you to see us. If you're watching us on YouTube or just listening, hopefully, it's been good to hear us. We'll see you next time on the Deeper Dive podcast. God bless.
Hi, guys.